Right, good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Jeffrey, and I'm the librarian at Wolfson College. And today we're going to be talking about being productive as researchers, as students, and just generally in life as well. And we're going to do that through two different lenses. First of all, looking at kind of more classic time management issues, but then also looking at being a reflective researcher and putting that into practice and making sure that we get the most from the feedback that we receive and also moving forward as well. That should hopefully make us more productive. I'm going to share my screen with you. So I'll just bring up my slides. Okay, I might struggle to see the chat during this. So if you've got any issues, if you can unmute and just ask a question, then that's fine. But there'll be lots of activities throughout this, so that'll be an opportunity to pause, and then I'll stop sharing at that point and can see the chat if you're unable to unmute yourself. So first of all, just thinking a little bit about what productivity is. This is a measure of efficiency. It's not about getting lots and lots of things done all the time, trying to multitask, trying to keep all those plates spinning. Actually, it's about doing things really consistently and getting the most out of that time slot that we've allotted for a particular activity. And a large part of that is having a really clear idea of what you want to achieve in that specific time frame. So really knowing about where you're going, why you're doing it, what you want to get from that particular activity so that you've got a sense of whether or not you've achieved it at the end. So a nice way to think about this is kind of analogy of, a racing car. I think there's a sense that productivity is just about whizzing down the motorway, but it's not. It's about going a really nice, consistent, steady speed rather than stopping and starting all the time. And it's about identifying those really important things that need to get done at that moment in time, rather than just trying to give your all to absolutely everything, because we can't, as we know. You've had a couple of weeks here so far. You will have had so many opportunities available to you through work, through socializing, trying to meet new people, just trying to get yourself set up in terms of where you live, whether or not you need to go and get food, get things to make that kind of your studying and your socializing easier as well. So all these things, they're all kind of competing for our time. So it's really about identifying priorities, making the most of the time that we do have. So the way we're going to do that, as I said, is divide it into two parts. First of all, classically looking at time management, and we'll spend probably a little bit longer on this, and there's a few more activities that you can work on with this. We'll think about the obstacles, we'll think about all the different aspects of time management. It's not just one thing that we can easily deal with in one chunk, as well as looking at some of the challenges, some of the distractions that we have on our time. And then we'll move on to reflective practice, and we'll do a little bit of kind of thinking about the theory behind that, really understanding what reflective practice is and how you can practice it as well. And then we'll try a few reflective practice activities. So we've got about an hour and a half today, but if there's any more questions that you have going forward, then please do feel free to get in touch with me, and all my contact details will be on the end of these slides, and we'll share the whole recording of the slides with you at the start of next week. Okay, are there any questions at that point? Nope. Okay, so first of all, why is time management difficult? I would expect that the fact that you're here today means that there might be from time to time issues that you have with your time management, and certainly I do. There's so much that we have to do and so much that we would really like to do, and that of course is the big challenge, is to kind of identifying the difference between what we really absolutely have to do and the things that we love to do if we had the spare time, but we don't always have that time. Then there's a kind of external influences as well, the things that we feel we ought to do, that sort of peer pressure. And sometimes that's really good. It gets us to try something new, something we wouldn't have thought about before. It might get us out of our room after a long day of work, get us meeting new people. But sometimes those obligations can feel like quite a lot of pressure, particularly when for you've prioritized doing some work. So we've got all these different influences on our time. And there just simply isn't enough time to do absolutely everything. So that's why we have to be really strong and really clear about what it is we want to do and how long we've got to do it. So one model for dealing with time management, and there's lots and lots of different ones out there, is this one, which asks a series of questions of us, what, how, when, where, and why. And the hyperlink in the title of this slide takes you to our LibGuide. So if you're not familiar with our LibGuide, it's a series of asynchronous resources that we've developed with lots of tips and tools. There's lots of worksheets on there, little videos, short recordings of us talking about time management, and that can help you explore this topic in a bit more detail. So when we think about the what, it's actually what have we got to do, having a list, having an idea, having that written down somehow. When it's all in our head, it can feel really, really overwhelming. How are we going to do it? Actually, have we got the right things that we need? When are we going to do it? And that's the issue around prioritization. Where? And that goes in terms, that's in terms of the physical space that we're working in, but also the kind of online environment as well. And then really that kind of motivational issue at the end, why is it we're doing it? So before I start talking too much, I think it'd be really helpful for you to just stop and pause. And that's one of the big things with these workshops. They're not intended necessarily to kind of revolutionize the way that you think about academic skills, but it is a way for you to build in a little break in the week or in your term to stop and pause and reflect on what it is that you're doing and whether or not there's ways you can improve it. So I'm going to get you doing something first of all. If you're on a laptop, on your phone, on a piece of paper, write down everything that has your attention at the moment. And I would just put it all over the page. You could put it in a list if you want, but I think it's more helpful because with a list, there's immediately some kind of hierarchy. Whereas if you just dot them all over the page, if you've got Post-its to hand, you could put one idea on each Post-it. And these are things that you have to do. So this might be something like a supervision. You might have lectures. You might have time that you've got to spend in the lab. Things that you'd really like to do. It might be that you've joined a new club and society, or that one of your friends has and that you want to go along to something about that. Even just things that you're thinking about, plans that you've got, ideas that you've got that might not be pressing on you at all, but all the stuff that's got your attention. And jot all those down. So we'll just take a couple of minutes to do that. So yeah, come back at 1:15. And like I said, I'm just going to unshare the screen for a second so I can see if there's anything in the chat. Hi, so welcome to the people who joined us during the start there. Okay, just perhaps 20 seconds more, jotting things down. Okay, so this is the first part of time management, is getting a really good sense of absolutely everything that you have to do. There's nothing worse, is there, than suddenly getting halfway through the day and realizing you've forgotten to do something the day before, or suddenly, something happening next week and it's caught you unawares and actually you just haven't got time to put everything else in place to get that done. So whether you do this on a daily basis, whether you do it last thing at night, everything that's on your mind, getting stuff down and capturing it, because it is really easy to forget things, whereas when it's in front of you, it's much easier to stay on top of it. So hopefully you had some of these things in your list. The what, so writing, lectures, hobbies, you might have lab work, socializing, training for sports, or just doing some more exercise generally, eating, sleeping, all these things are absolutely critical. And lots of people tend not to put those in their to-do list, the eating, sleeping, exercising, taking time out for yourself. You kind of put down the things that are often imposed on you by other people. But it's really important that we prioritize all that. And that's the only way that we're going to stay fit and healthy in order to be able to undertake academic work and have a busy social life as well. So yeah, washing clothes, cleaning, all these things take time. And often we don't block out enough time in the day. And that's when we feel that things kind of pile onto us. Okay, so of all the things that you have, perhaps unpack one of those tasks. I've suggested doing it for an academic task here because that's kind of the emphasis of the session. But if you want to unpack another task, it could be buying a birthday present for a family member, something like that. Like, what are all the different steps, all the different stages you have to go through? Equally, if you've got a reading group maybe coming up next week, rather than just having on a to-do list, prepare for reading group, actually, what are all the things that you would need to do? Do you need to access the article online or even go into a library to find the book? Do you need then to identify which sections you're going to read? Then how long is it going to take you to read? Do you need to make notes? Do you need to then summarize those notes afterwards so you feel confident going into the reading group to make a point? So all the different stages, however minute they might feel, really try and unpack it. And we're just going to spend 1 minute on that, so not very long at all. So I think the thing is we can quite often surprise ourselves how many steps there are in doing something that previously might have just taken one line on our to-do list. So how do we get into the mindset of making sure that we give ourselves sufficient time to do one of these kind of macro tasks by identifying all the micro tasks? And possibly you've come across this model before, developing smart objectives. So your objectives are how you're going to get to your aim. Your aim might be to write a chapter of a thesis, but there's going to be loads of objectives that you're going to need to fulfill to get there. And the way to do that is to break them down, like we said. So be really specific. So rather than saying, I'm just going to do some reading this morning, actually, which books are you going to read? How much of them are you going to read? You just need to read certain page references, a couple of chapters. Be really specific. And in doing so, you're making it measurable. That means you know when you've achieved what you set out to do. If you just say, I'm going to do some reading, it's quite dissatisfying because you don't know if you've done enough. Whereas if you're really strict with yourself and say, I need to get this done, have I achieved it? No, I haven't. Okay, I'm then going to have to make more time before I've actually completed this task. Is it achievable? Is it something that you can actually do? Have you got those resources to hand? Have you spoken to the right people? Do you really understand the task that you're undertaking? Is it realistic? It might be realistic to say that you can write an essay, but is it realistic to say you can write an essay in half an hour? So that's where all these things kind of intersect as well. And being time bound, being really specific about how long you've given yourself to undertake a specific task. Now, obviously, what we don't want to do in being really, thinking about time management in a really kind of minute way is we don't want to generate more tasks for you to do. We don't want this to take longer in the actual planning than it does to carry things out. But just having this mindset, constantly just checking in with yourself and thinking, have I been smart here? Have I been as specific as I possibly can? And often it is because we don't break tasks down enough. We forget that there's multiple stages involved. I came across this resource recently, Goblin Tools, and this is a series of AI tools that are designed specifically for neurodivergent students, but actually I think there's huge benefits for everybody in some of these tools that they've developed. And there's one called Magic To Do. And what this does is just breaks down a task. So this is what the screen looks like when you first come in. You see the chilies on the right hand side, and that's basically saying how difficult, how much breaking down do I need for this task? How difficult is this task going to be? Do I just need top level, in which case it might be one chili, or actually I really need every single section breaking down for me? And it could be anything. It could be, making a lasagna. But in terms of academic things, you can use it in that way as well. So I put in a prompt for it. To ask for all the different steps in terms of writing an essay. And so this is the checklist that it developed for me. Choose a topic, conduct research, create an outline, write a statement, start writing an introduction, develop body paragraphs, all these different sections. And then what you can do is break down those tasks as well. So for example, if we break down the task on conducting preliminary research, which to me sounds like quite a big thing. So if that was just one thing on my to-do list, it would take me days, weeks, months to complete that, depending on the length of your assignment. So having just one checkbox for me would be dissatisfying because day after day, I wouldn't be able to tick it off. Whereas actually, if I break it down into all these different sections, identifying the specific topic of an essay, defining the scope and objectives of the research, gathering resources, even that I might want to break down further, but then it's much easier to tick things off. And that comes back into that feedback loop, that motivation, that giving ourselves a little boost that we've actually achieved something, rather than just, as you can see at the very top, my prompt to this tool was write a 4,000 word essay. If that was on my to-do list, that would take a little while before I could tick it off. So you don't have to use this tool, but I think it is a useful reminder that there are lots and lots of different stages to everything that we set out to do. Now, one of the biggest questions we often get is, yeah, but how do I know how long something's going to take? Particularly if you've just started a new stage of research, you're doing your master's research, you're doing a PhD. I think we've also got some undergraduates joining us today. Then it's just going to be slightly different to your previous experiences. The amount of time it takes you to read or to write something might be different because you're reading at a deeper level or you're writing in a more complex fashion. So when you first start out, it is tricky to know how much time to allot yourself. So one way to do that would be to use some way of collecting how long it takes you. So working it out through experience. Okay, I sat down for 2 hours and this is how much I read. Or I tried to write an introduction in a morning, but this is how far I got. And you could do that by using an app. So there are a couple of free ones out there like Toggle Track or Tracking Time, or just create a little grid on paper or on Word, start time, stop time, and just some way of quantifying how much you've actually achieved during that time. And what this will do is over the next few days, few weeks, it's going to give you some baseline data. And this will give you a sense for when things go really well, how much can I read if it's going really well and I kind of understand what's going on and I don't need to do too much deep reading, what would be my best time scenario? What's my kind of average for just most of the time? This is how much I can get done. And of course, there's always going to be times when writing is really tough or when you're given problem sheets that are just slightly outside your comfort zone. So that's going to be your kind of pessimistic estimate. What's my worst recorded time? And then there's a little bit of maths here that you can do just to work out a time estimate. So you can look at your most optimistic estimate, your most pessimistic estimate, added to 4 of your most likely estimates. And that will give you a sort of time on task analysis, a rough average for how long it's going to take. You don't have to boil it down to that level if you don't want to, but for some people, that's kind of a helpful way of just keeping track of how long it's taking you to do things. Okay, so we're just going to pause there again and give you a chance to put some of this into practice. You could either plan a smart objective, so something that's coming up next week, something that you've got to do, and rather than just putting one thing on your to-do list, break it down, make it smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. How long would you spend doing that task, and how would you know when you've completed it? Or you could look at some of the apps that are out there that I've just suggested. So Goblin Tools, the Magic To-Do List, Toggle Track, or Tracking Time. So just have a very quick look at them. We won't spend too long on this. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to think about breaking things down further. What I'll do is I'll take those links and I'll pop them in the chat. sorry, it's come out in the same size font that it was on the PowerPoint slide, but there's the 3 links there. Okay, so I know that was a very short amount of time, but hopefully that's given you an opportunity even just to bring up those apps and something you could explore in a bit more detail. As we said, we don't want to generate more tasks here, but if you find that things are slipping, that you're struggling a little bit with your time, some of those time management apps might be quite helpful. So that was the what have we got to do? So like we said, getting everything down on paper and then trying to break it down and make sure we really understand what we're asking of ourselves. Then there's the when. And this is a really nice quote from Eisenhower, President of the United States in the 1960s. Who can define for us with accuracy the difference between the long and short term? Especially when our affairs seem to be in crisis, we're almost compelled to give our first attention to the urgent present rather than the important future. So that sense of, again, feeling like things are being put on you and you've got to respond to those external requests first, rather than actually what's important for you and what do you need to prioritize. So that's the idea. Prioritization is not just what you've got to do, but when you've got to do it. And the Eisenhower matrix is apparently something that he used in terms of trying to identify what his priorities were. Now, of course, Eisenhower would have had a massive staff of people who could have helped him with all these things that he could have delegated tasks to. You don't. So this is a slightly adapted version for students. But it can be a really helpful way when everything just feels like it's getting on top of you to really work out what is really urgent and important. So what you can draw on a big piece of paper, you could put a cross in the middle of it, and if you've perhaps earlier, when we were getting that mind sweep, getting everything down on post-it notes or on bits of paper, you could either cut up your paper or move your post-its around and put them in each of the quadrants. So what is important and urgent goes in the top left. What is important but not that urgent, you can do that later. What feels urgent but actually isn't important at all, that's something that's a distraction. And if it's not important and not urgent, then don't do it. And that's a really tough thing to do because quite often everything that is on your to-do list is something you want to do in some way, shape or form. But there might be times when you have to say, actually, I'm not going to do that. So with distractions, that's thinking like things like when notifications come up on your phone, there's a sense of urgency. If there's a sound or something pops up, you feel, oh, I should just check that. Now, you didn't necessarily ask for that to come your way. You can wait on that. That's something that feels urgent, but actually it might not be that important. Actually, just focusing on your work for the next half hour is important. And then you might make time to check your phone after that. Or somebody coming to you and saying, oh, I really need help with something. They might knock on your door and it feels really urgent. It's important for them, but it might not be that important for you. So being able to manage expectations from friends and family and say, actually, I'm going to work in these hours. So, I'll get back to you later. I'll come and help you then if I can. So really trying to narrow down that list, which has absolutely everything, all of your attention at the moment, probably should be able to fall into these 4 quarters. And when we've done this as an in-person workshop, to begin with, everyone puts everything in the urgent and important quadrant. And slowly, once they sort of talk it through, they realise that there are some things that could be done a little bit later or that actually aren't important in the first place. So when you're going to do something, that idea of prioritization is also, there's a kind of hierarchy there, depending on how long the task is going to take. So that's why that time on task analysis is really important in the first place. And it might be that you've got a really small reading task, or you've got some email that you want to clear, or it is about phoning a relative or a friend. And you might be able to fit that in into small little chunks in the day, perhaps if you've got a gap between two meetings. It might feel like a kind of useless time slot. Oh, I've only got 20 minutes before I do something else. But is there something that you want to get ticked off that list that you can squeeze into that time slot? Or if you've only got 20 minutes, could that be a good time to pop to a shop while you're in town, or to drop into the library to pick up those resources so that you can do your reading later on? I think another thing about when you do something is, when do you work best? And everybody works differently. I'm always amazed in the library. There are definitely people who work really well 9 to 5, and I see them on a regular basis. But if I'm working late in the library, I will see a completely different group of people. And I know that there are some people who work best from midnight till 4. I wouldn't suggest that's an ideal work time, but that's when they feel that they're at their most productive. However, it is often easier to do something that's really tricky at the start of your day, whenever that is. So if you are the sort of person that gets up early, get that tricky thing done first thing. If you find you don't work best until the afternoon, just make sure you start with that tricky task. And think about different ways of planning. So when am I going to do something on a daily basis? What am I going to do in the morning? What am I going to do in the afternoon? In terms of a medium plan, actually, what have I got to do this week? You might not like that micro level of management, that kind of feeling of like, oh no, it's 10 o'clock and I haven't finished my writing or my reading. But actually, sometimes just having that overview, this week I must achieve these things, but I know I'm going to be flexible about when I do them. That might be a nice scale. Or you might prefer to kind of have the biggest overview, a kind of long-term plan. I think it's really important when we are planning to just think about the worst case scenario. How long could this possibly take me? And then if I finish the task more quickly, that's great. That's bonus time. That's a nice feeling to get something done quickly. And it's a motivation to get something done, not quickly so you're not doing the work properly, but just kind of keeping focused, getting it done to buy yourself a little bit of extra time at the end. And leave gaps. As we know, supervisors might have to rearrange supervisions. It might be that you plan to do some reading, but actually you go to the ebook and it's checked out and you've got to wait a couple of hours before someone else finishes reading it. There's all sorts of reasons why things can get derailed. So if you've got gaps and you've got that flexibility and you haven't planned every 5 minutes of a day, then you generally feel better about something when it goes wrong, rather than completely change the way you want to do things. So just looking at a few sort of plans, I think it is really important to have some form of long-term planning, to know when the pinch points are going to be in your term. If you've got deadlines, if you've got specific meetings, if you're involved in anything extracurricular, if you're in a production at the ADC, you're going to need to know when the show dates are. If you are involved in sports fixtures, you're going to make sure that they're on your calendar as well. And then this is an idea for a kind of a template for a week planner. And all these templates are online and I'll show you where they are in a moment. So what's your key focus? What do you really want to get out of this week? Particularly if you're doing PhD research, you perhaps haven't got that kind of those regular deadlines that you're used to having. So you might just have to have a focus for your week rather than something that you absolutely have to do. Then there's going to be kind of non-negotiables, things that you have to do, academic meetings and appointments, extracurricular commitments. And then it's also really good having this week plan in terms of kind of situating what you've got to do in that wider picture, because we never finish everything. It's very rare there's a day where like absolutely nothing to do. So thinking about what you wanted to get done last week and perhaps didn't quite finish and that you need to kind of prioritize this week, things that you really want to do this week, and also things that are coming up next week. And that's where that long-term planning comes in. So what would it be really nice if I actually managed to start something from next week as well? And then, of course, there's a classic kind of to-do list for the day. What do I want to achieve? What are your daily goals? And when am I going to do them? Morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on when you work best. So what I'm going to do is show you where those templates are. You can download them or you can draw up your own template. You might already work in a really effective way. And then think about blocking out the essentials. So like we said, if you've got to go shopping and do your washing, that's all going to take time. If you've got to do shopping, I talked to someone the other week and they'd walked all the way into town, they'd done their shopping and they'd come back again. And they said, oh, I didn't realize how far it was into town. So it'd taken them quite a long time even just to get there. And then they felt they were kind of behind for the rest of the day. Then look at the time that you've got left. So I will now show you the Wolfson College LibGuide. I will put this link in the chat as well. Actually, I'll take you to the time management page and then it'd be easier to go directly to it. So as I said, if you haven't seen this before, these are all our kind of asynchronous resources. Time management is listed under the wider academic skills section. And there we go, we've got our top tips. We've got the Eisenhower template, if you want to do there, and then the time management templates here. These are the ones that I've just shown you on that slide. So let me put that link into the chat. And if you want to, you could download those Word templates and try filling one in, or you could just do it roughly by hand. But if I go back to the slide, what we were asking you to do, think about, yeah, today, next week, next few weeks, try and plan on that scale. So this might be racking your brain, it might be checking your diary, it might be looking at a few emails. And again, we'll just take 1 or 2 minutes for you to start that, and then you can obviously finish that in your own time. Keeping an eye on the chat on my phone, and I can't see anything that's come in, but as I said, do just feel free to unmute at any time and ask a question. We'll also take a pause at the end of the time management section before we start the reflective practice section, just to see if there's any questions as well. Okay, so if we bring that to a close. So we often think of the first 2 really as all that there is to time management. We think about the what is it I've got to do and when am I going to do it? And those really are the kind of the key priorities. But there's other factors that feed into our ability to kind of be productive and to manage our time effectively. And one of them is, where are we going to do something? And from my own experience, I feel that being organized saves you a lot of time. If you've got stuff spread out all over a desk, then trying to find a relevant piece of paper is going to take you time. That's going to waste your time. Whereas if everything was neatly organized and you needed something, you could go to it straight away. So there's that side of kind of where are you going to do it, being organized, but also actually just feeling productive is a really large part of it. So being comfortable, having a really good workstation. So today I'm standing up and I've got my laptop on a chair, but that's because I've hurt my back. And so I feel much more comfortable today standing up than I do sitting down. But if you've got if the light is poor in a room, something really simple, like if you've got a light source from behind you, if there's a lamp or something, try not to have it on the side where you write with your hand, or if you're writing by hand, because that will cast a shadow over the page. Whereas if the light comes from the other side, you'll illuminate your page. So really tiny things like that. But if you're struggling to see what you're doing, that's going to make you more tired, potentially a bit more irritable. You're not going to necessarily be as productive. Make sure the desk that you're working at is comfortable. So a student came into the library the other day and was asking for a slightly taller desk because they're a little bit taller, and they were finding that classic desks were really uncomfortable. We've got a range of different furniture in the library. If you're finding that the desk in your room isn't very comfortable, we've got lots of study aids as well. We've got lumbar supports, we've got cushions, we've got writing slopes, we've got laptop stands, we've got bigger screens that you can plug your laptop into. So making sure that you're set up and you feel really comfortable. And then think about if there's anything distracting you. Are there noise sources? Is the light too bright? We'll talk about other distractions in a minute, but trying to get yourself in a really good frame of mind to have a really productive work session actually can make a massive difference. And it can make a difference to how long something takes as well. And then I think the final thing is really to think about trying not to blur your boundaries between your rest space and your workspace. Now, I know if you're in a college room or if you're in a rented accommodation, you may not have lots of different spaces that you can access, but just to be creative and to think about it. So sometimes getting out of your room and coming into college, or if you're already in college, working in the Karen Spark Jones room or the library or the old combination room, changing things a little bit to make sure that you can then go back to your room, and then that's the space where you can kind of try and forget about everything you've got to do. So we talked a little bit about the idea of having a messy desk, but one of the biggest things in terms of being able to find things again is there's a challenge with physical notes. So if you have notebooks, how are you going to find something again? Some people will come and see me for a one-to-one session in the library, and they'll have a notebook and they'll be flicking through saying, hang on, it's in here somewhere. So thinking of some way of organizing your physical notes, numbering your pages and having a contents page, if you do work best in kind of an analog way, with paper and pen. Give yourself a contents page, then you can find things again really, really quickly. You might also write things down on post-it notes like we did. That might be your way of capturing stuff I've got to do this week. You might have a diary or some kind of research journal that you kind of get ideas into. Please make sure you back them up. Every year somebody will come to me and say, I've lost a black folder, it's got all my notes in, or I've lost my purple notebook, it's got all my appointments and all my notes from all my supervisions. Please back them up. And by that might mean photocopying them. We've got scanners in the library, and that scans directly to your university email address. Maybe even just taking photos with your phone at the end of the day, just really quickly, so that you've got some kind of backup. Don't know if you've come across bullet journaling. The idea of a bullet journal is to keep everything in one place. So it's not just a notebook, it's not just a diary, it's not just a kind of ideas repository, but that idea of kind of organizing your physical notes, the kind of philosophy behind bullet journaling, is one that you can apply to physical notes in whatever form. So I've given some ideas there of how you might use bullet journals. We've got a great book in the library. There's lots and lots of beautiful pictures on the internet. If you ever looked up bullet journaling before, it doesn't have to look like this. You don't have to be really artistic, but it is just a way of having everything in one place. I personally don't work well with pen and paper. I'd much rather have it on a computer, but you can still think about that idea, still think about having everything in one place. So that's your physical notes, but in terms of your digital notes as well, I've put this up as an example. Does this look familiar to you? Have you got any folders like this where you've got things with really similar names that don't differentiate them? You've got PDFs that you've downloaded that have completely meaningless names, and you're just not sure whether 6064 18666 1SM is that article you downloaded, on a particular topic or not? Have you got folders that aren't properly nested, that just have generic terms? If you have, then really think about some sort of file naming convention that's going to help you find things quickly. Because as we know, the problem now, particularly with all Microsoft products, is that as soon as you open something, you get a new date stamp on it. So you can't rely on that for something that you say, oh yeah, I downloaded that, 3 months ago. It might be that by accident you opened it and it looks like you downloaded it last week. So a naming convention is really, really important. So there's just a suggestion here. Having some sort of prefix that tells you what the document is. Is this a report? Is it notes? Is it an essay? Some sort of title that's really quite descriptive. Version control, again, is really important. I make the mistake all the time of opening something up, beginning to edit it and thinking, oh, I'll save that in a moment as a new version. And of course, it's immediately overwritten the old version. So if you want different versions, make sure you're saving them and naming them appropriately. And then some sort of date stamp, because you can't rely on the date stamp in the folders. Think about building up a folder structure now, anticipating all the sorts of work that you might create over the next few months, over the next few years. It doesn't matter if you don't use those folders, but then there's somewhere there to save that straight away, and create folders within folders so that you've got nice nested folder structure. Wherever possible, don't put stuff on your desktop. Quite often people will come into the library and they'll open up their laptop if they've got an issue and there's just thousands of PDFs on there. If you can try and put them in folders, it's going to save you lots of time later on. So yeah, I think hopefully you can see how that is actually a really important part of time management, even though it doesn't kind of feel like it. And then the final section on this is to consider why. Why do we do things? You know, what's our motivation for getting something done? And that's what can really help us be productive, really knowing why we're doing something. And sometimes we have to do something for other people. It's not necessarily because we want to do it, but bearing that in mind, being really clear about what your task is, what's wanted of you, and then knowing when you've achieved it. Making sure that you build breaks into your day is really important as well. That kind of reward structure, saying I'm going to be really productive for, and it could be any amount of time. It could be 15 minutes. You might know that that's kind of your limit. It might be half an hour. It might be 2 hours. You might be really lucky and you can keep really focused for that long. But be honest with yourself. Maybe set yourself a timer. Try some of the kind of Pomodoro techniques that are out there. If you set a timer maybe for half an hour, take a 5-minute break, you know, check your phone, have a drink, get up, stretch, again, feeling comfortable in your working position, and then working for another half hour or hour, whatever works best for you. And that is really important. It's really important for you to be able to take breaks for your own mental health. And again, as we said, ultimately for your productivity. There's lots and lots of evidence that suggests that if we just carry on working, our ability to retain information and to work at the same speed on the same task decreases massively. And then just finally, to kind of really emphasize that importance of reaching out within the college to our wellbeing advisor, to the deputy senior tutor, to the college nurse, if you feel that actually you're really struggling to kind of stay on top of things. And please do come and see us in the library as well, and we can talk through time management more broadly then. So I just wanted to flag up a few other tools that are out there to help you manage your time. Hopefully you've all got some sort of calendar in place. It always surprises me that there are several people out there who don't, but I really would emphasize there's a lot coming at you, and what you might previously have been able to hold in your head may no longer be the case. So whether that's a paper diary or whether it's online. Again, I'm a huge convert of online calendars because with a paper one, there isn't really that flexibility. You know, if you block out time in your day to do something and you don't get around to doing it, it's kind of less easy to necessarily move it over to the next day. Whereas for me, I will block out time in my diary and I can then just drag and drop the task into the subsequent days if I don't get around to doing it. Lots and lots of to-do list tools out there. And the great thing with those is, you know, you can check things off. It'll often send you reminders if you haven't done something. So Microsoft To Do integrates really nicely with all the other Microsoft products that we use at university. Google Tasks does the same job. Todoist is another one out there. Little reminders, you know, if you don't like physical post-it notes, something like Google Keep, and I use that all the time on my phone, just something that occurs to me I need to do later, I'll stick it on there. Some really great project management tools out there, and we can go into these in lots more detail if you want to come and check in. Particularly something like Trello is something we've used a lot in the library. You can create to-do lists, again, timings, you can plan really nicely, you can move tasks around depending on what you've got to do with them. And when we talk about, we do a session on dissertations and we look at Trello in a bit more detail then. And then, yes, there's lots of other apps out there such as Notion, AnyDo, or in a physical format like a bullet journal that will tick all these boxes and kind of keep everything in one place if you like being organized in that way. And then finally, just to kind of flag up that there are so many distractions. Like we said, they could be environmental. They could be that there's noise coming from another room. It could be there's the light shining in at you, you know, you're finding that a distraction. But actually, in terms of digital distractions, it's really easy when we're searching, perhaps when we're legitimately doing research and we come across lots of different other papers and we think, oh, that sounds really interesting, or, oh, I don't know what that term means, I'll follow that up, or what about this? And before long, you find that the paper that you were meant to be reading, you've opened about 13 tabs on your computer. You're looking at them all in different ways. You're not actually doing the task that you set out to do. So having some sort of mechanism that means you can kind of keep track of all the stuff you'd like to do, all the stuff that you've found out. And this might be a kind of paper template or a Word document or a Padlet board, all sorts of different ways that you can capture things that are really important to follow up, but you don't necessarily want to get distracted from the task that you're doing. Something else, of course, about digital distractions is there are issues around kind of wellness. If we find that we're constantly being distracted, that can make us feel low, feel us like we're not investing enough in our kind of digital presence. We're not, again, like I said, if you've got friends and family who feel that they're contacting you all the time, you feel bad for not getting back to them. Managing your boundaries around kind of digital space is really important for your health. So just thinking about, having a balance. Like I said, it might be having really short time slots and checking in digitally. It might be having checklists of things that you want to follow up in more ways. It might be leaving your phone in your bag and even just having it on your table. There's lots of research been done on if your phone is in sight, you're way more likely to check it. And then even if it's just, in a pocket in your coat, hanging on your chair or in a bag, if you can't see it, we're less tempted generally. We've talked about this already, but giving yourself permission to move your desk out of your room, getting to somewhere else that makes you feel kind of turned off from all those other distractions. Perhaps working in an analog way, just taking a book outside and reading it for a little bit and not having your computer to hand. But ultimately, the big message from all this is just try and stay flexible. We can't control absolutely every aspect. There are lots of different forces acting upon us. So build in buffers if things overrun. Be kind to yourself if you don't get something done in the time that you've allotted. And if you do have a little bit of extra time at the end of the day, use it as a reward. Help it with those kind of motivational elements. Okay, so I'm just going to stop there for a moment and I'm going to stop sharing as well. And just come back to the room. Anyone want to make any comments on anything that we've said? Lots of these activities are very deliberately kind of individual because we just find that interaction doesn't work particularly well. But if you'd like to share anything with the group, it'd be really nice to hear that, whether it's in the chat or for you to unmute. Sometimes I find the hardest part of a plan is getting started. Any tips? Yeah, so I think being able to kind of break down your tasks in some way, shape, or form is really tricky, but that's the best way to do it. Really getting a sense of what is it I'm trying to do. So like we said, thinking of the kind of the macro task and then working out what all those kind of micro tasks are underneath it. And that will give you a sense of the scale of the operation. I think that's kind of really helpful. You can then think about the prioritization. You can think about those smart objectives within that. How is this going to be measurable? That makes it sound like a much bigger thing than it is to get started. But I think just trying to kind of come into something sideways and think, oh, I've just got to get started. I've just got to start with that reading or that writing or that presentation that I've got to give. And actually, that's when it can be quite chaotic. And then we feel like we're not really making progress. So I think going back to that initial stage, you don't have to use something like Goblin, but I think for me that was a kind of quite an eye-opener in terms of, yes, there's almost infinite number of stages and you have to make a decision about how much you're going to break down that task. But by seeing something really small, really manageable that you feel you can tick off in the next 15 minutes, for me is a big motivator, rather than just blocking out 3 hours and saying, I've got this massive task I've got to do. So yeah, that would be my sense. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, speaker. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, feel free to pop more questions in the chat if you've got them, but I'm going to share my screen again and we're going to move on to the next section of the presentation. Okay, so reflective practice. We're going to talk a little bit about what this is and about how you can be a reflective practitioner. And I think as a researcher, this is really, really important. So I know we've got a variety of people on the call today, some of you doing 9-month masters, so that things are going to be coming at you quite quickly. But some of you will be working on a project for your PhD for the next 3 years. So constantly being able to kind of query yourself, to learn from your experiences. Some of you haven't got long to learn from those experiences, so being reflective is really, really important. If you've got a much longer project, actually it's really going to be difficult to kind of keep everything in your mind and to remember kind of why something went well or it didn't go well. So again, being reflective on a longer project is really important as well. I think it works well for all people. So we're just going to start with doing a bit of reflection. So I'm going to ask you to look at the image in front of you and to reflect on it, and perhaps just to pop a few comments in the chat. What would be your reflections? And I'm deliberately not explaining what reflections means, just to see what your initial thoughts are. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. We've got one that's come through. Happy memories, a nice vacation time. Just give you about 15 more seconds just to, if you've got anything else you want to reflect on. Holidays, first time surfing, feelings about that. Brilliant. Okay, so that's really nice. So we've got, you're reflecting on it for how it makes you feel. And I think that's what's really important is so what you felt after doing it. Brilliant. Yep. So we've got how you felt before something, how you felt after, what you learned from it. Great, Nikhil. Thank you. Yeah, it's so looking at this and thinking, oh yeah, I love it when it's warm, looking outside today and it's really, really rainy here in Cambridge. And thinking, oh, I wish it was the summer again. I love it when it's that time of year. Or yeah, I love going to the beach. Or maybe if you don't like going to the beach, you don't like the sound of the waves, this might actually make you feel really uncomfortable and something that you wouldn't want to do and you wouldn't want to go into the water. We will all have a different reflection to this on this. But yes, what it's not is describing it. What we're not saying is there's two people on the beach carrying surfboards heading towards the water. We're saying how it makes us feel. What's our kind of emotional response to it? So that's brilliant. Thank you. So yeah, what is reflection? Questioning how and why something happened the way it did do. And this is, yeah, the really significant bit is our feelings. What kind of response does that make us give? Nicola, you made a great point there. So looking back, in the past, how do we feel before something? How does it make us feel now? And what are we going to do in the future? Like we said, it can be really great. You could to reflect. It's fine to reflect on positive things as well. Reflective practice isn't just about saying something went wrong. Why did it go wrong? How am I going to learn from it? It's also saying, wow, I did really well there. That, essay that I handed in, that chapter I gave to my supervisor, I got some really great feedback on that. What did I do well that time? So reflection is equally important to make sure that you record all the stages that you took there, or why did you have that good understanding, or had you managed to have a conversation with somebody beforehand that helped you articulate your thoughts? What were the processes you went through that led to that positive experience? We're always reflecting. I mean, it's something that we do constantly. If you might tell somebody that you're going off to a meeting and then afterwards say, oh, how did it go? That's us reflecting when we then say, oh yeah, it was really good, this happened, or oh, actually I felt really uncomfortable, I felt totally unprepared, or yeah, it didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. What you're doing there is reflecting on that. So it's really important to do that. How did it make us feel right now and when it was happening? but also, what are we going to do? How are we going to change what we do in the future, or how are we going to do the same again if it was a positive experience? So that looking forward is really important. So I've just popped a few models of reflection on the screen, and you're possibly quite familiar with these. Certainly, Kolb's learning cycle is one that a lot of people have come across before. They're all slightly different, but they're all essentially the same. And so looking at the ERA cycle on the top left, experience, so something happens to us, we reflect on it, and then the most important thing is the action, that we're going to do something as a result of that reflection. That's exactly the same as Driscoll's model. The what happened, so what, asking ourselves, well, was that good? Was it bad? What do I care? And then the now what? What am I going to do in the future? The learning cycle there, so we have this kind of experience, we reflect on it, we then come up with ideas. And so this is the kind of 4-stage process, that having the ideas and then actually putting that into practice, that active experimentation, trying something a bit different to see if we can have a different experience next time. And then the reflective cycle by Gibbs is quite nice because that puts the feelings in. It's not just us thinking about it, but it's kind of us responding to that initial emotive reaction. So yeah, they all work in a really similar way, but I think it's quite nice sometimes just to look at the theory a little bit as well. So how do we reflect? Like we said, we do it all the time when we're talking to people. If you phone up, a family member or friend and tell them how your week was, we are reflecting, but it's difficult to capture that. And that's why reflective writing is really important, because it acts as an aid memoir going forward. We can look back at how something went last week, 3 months ago, a year ago, and we can still put those learning objectives into practice. So reflective writing is written in the first person. It's kind of what we do if you keep a diary. If you write a diary every night or every couple of days, you will often say what you did in the first person. And the really important thing about reflective writing is not to worry about the quality of the writing, not to worry about your grammar or your spelling or whether or not you've got fully formed sentences. Let it flow, so that in the same way that you would talk. And for some people, actually just making voice notes can be a really good way of doing this, rather than writing it down, and then you could always write down the main points later, but just keep it flowing. Don't worry about how it looks. This is going to be how you feel. It's subjective. Don't worry. In theory, no one else is going to read this. That would be the best case scenario. So put down however it made you feel. If it made you feel uncomfortable or angry, if it made you feel that you weren't very confident in a particular situation, it's okay to do that, because this is for your eyes only. And that's what makes it uninhibited. You don't have to worry about someone else judging you. It should also be time limited. This is probably healthy not just to keep writing, especially if something's gone really, really wrong. You get yourself into a loop. So saying, I'm going to write uninhibited for 3 minutes, for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, whatever works well for you. Occasionally, though, you will see people making their reflections public. So there are lots of blogs out there of people studying for PhDs or doing a master's thesis at university. There's lots of vlogs out there on YouTube, and this is people going through their process of reflection. So sometimes it can be helpful to learn from it in that way, but I think it's easiest and you're best and you're most honest when it's private. And then I think it's best to shut it, get that out on the page and then leave it for a little bit. That might be just while you go for a walk. It might be for a couple of days. Then come back with a clearer mind when you're slightly more dispassionate, and then think, okay, do I still feel this way? Have I learned anything else since I wrote this down? Do I want to change anything? Because at that point, you can then think, how am I going to put this into practice? How am I going to implement this in the future? Why don't we do it? One of the biggest reasons is probably time. So there are many years where I start a diary in January and I don't get very far because I just think, oh, I haven't really got time at the end of the day. Oh, I can't really be bothered to do that. But I think it's a really important thing to do. So it could be that you do it as kind of housekeeping thing. You've finished all your tasks for the day, and you just kind of have an ongoing Word document, or maybe you keep a private blog. It could be a WordPress site that's private just for you. Everything's date stamped and you just get your ideas down. And quite often that helps people then rest their mind for the evening to go to sleep, because they've kind of captured those thoughts. It's not going round and round in their head. A lack of skills. It is a kind of a particular way of writing, reflective writing. Some people don't feel very confident doing it, and so they feel uncomfortable putting their feelings on paper, and so they don't do it. Kind of why would you do it? And I think that's the thing, that if you're going to be a reflective writer, you've got to resolve that you're actually going to do something with that writing. You're going to learn from what you've put down. It might be that your environment isn't very conducive to that. It might be that actually we've got people on the call joining us today who are part-time students who have got families. You might have a job as well. You just don't really feel there's a space and a time where you can just write privately on your own. If you can carve that out, that's a really good thing to do, but it can sometimes prevent us from doing it. You might not have a culture of doing it. You might just have a culture of moving on really quickly and thinking, actually, I'm not going to dwell on the bad things. I'm just going to kind of keep moving. But more often than not, we're learning from that kind of feedback that we're giving ourselves. So you are quite often the biggest obstacle to reflective writing. And one of the reasons is that we feel uncomfortable about when things don't go right. We perhaps feel that we've failed, that we've let ourselves down, that we've let somebody else down. And there's almost an embarrassment that goes with that. That means we would rather just bury those negative experiences and just say, oh, it'll just be different next time. I'll just do it differently, but I'm not going to dwell on what went wrong this time. But I do think there's a lot of research out there, and I've put all the references at the end of this if you want to follow things up in a bit more detail, but how important it is to be prepared for failure, for it not to take us by surprise, for it not to take the wind out of us when we thought something was going to go well, but to imagine scenarios where things don't go quite well. And all the references here are about kind of academic scenarios of failure. But I think it's really important to be able to talk to people about when things haven't gone well. Sometimes people will say to me that in college, they feel that they've got to kind of constantly be positive about their course, but they don't feel positive about it. And they feel that everyone around them is having this great time, or their course is going really well, that kind of real imposter syndrome. More often than not, though, I think you'd be surprised that actually everybody at every stage feels things aren't going as well as they could do. They could be performing better, they could be writing better, they could feel stronger and more confident about the course that they're studying. So it's really tough in an academic environment, which is all about excellence. It's all about being our best. It's all about trying to excel. It's about being at Cambridge. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable in that environment. And actually, if everybody just turned around and said that, we would all feel a lot happier about it. So trying to develop a culture amongst friends or with family and to say, actually, things aren't going that well, and that's okay. So the idea of reflective practice, though, isn't to dwell on that, but it's to say, okay, they're not going well, but how am I going to improve what I'm doing? And so that's the idea of this last quote here, the idea about failing successfully. Something's gone wrong. How am I going to use that to improve what I'm doing next time? It's a source of self-discovery, learning about yourself, learning about the support that you might need to help you improve as well. And like we've already said, there's lots of sources of support within the college. There's your tutor, there's the wellbeing advisor, there's the college nurse, we're available within the library, and then there's a fantastic team within the wider university of counsellors and other wellbeing advisors as well. So just a little bit to look at the idea, we could use, there's a particular theory of change model that we can use to explore this in a bit more detail. And it really starts to unpack the idea of when things haven't gone well. So sometimes it's not just enough to say it didn't go well, but there's a really obvious reason. I hadn't given it enough time, or I hadn't really thought about it in enough depth. You can improve on that pretty quickly. But actually, there are other ways of doing it by kind of delving in a little bit more detail that's going to help us improve in the long run. So this theory of change model, the idea is understanding failure while it's occurring. So recognizing that feeling as it's happening, not just coming out the other end and looking back. And there are a series of questions that we can kind of ask ourselves. What was the incident? Why did it happen? What did we want to happen? What were the desired outcomes? What's the kind of impact of it going wrong? Does it matter? Is that going to change the course of what we're doing? And how are we going to be able to mitigate failure in the future? So there's a really nice table in this article by Hart. Here we go. So it's on the LSE blog. I don't know if any of you have seen this. It's got some fantastic articles on how to be a researcher. And although it's from the social sciences, I think there's really great applications across arts, humanities, and STEM subjects as well. So really nice little article. And then there's this table here that gives you that idea of how you can break things down a little bit more, gives you a few prompts. But one of the main reasons for doing this, for talking today on this, is because, as I said, I think developing a culture where it's okay to talk about failure is really, really important. And why is that? Because, yeah, if we feel uncomfortable, if we feel that we can't talk about it, we stop doing things. We avoid doing things. We say, I'm no good at that. I can't do it. And we just stop, rather than, what we would hope is that when you're at Cambridge as a researcher, you're grabbing all these opportunities, you're trying new things, you're experimenting, you understand that you might be setting yourself up to fail a little bit, but that's okay. Just imagine if you perhaps did a talk in the department and it didn't go very well, and you think, well, that's it, I'm not going to give any more presentations, rather than saying, okay, why not? Well, I probably hadn't worked on my slides enough. I didn't really feel comfortable as a public speaker. There's lots and lots of opportunities within the university that can help build your skill set. We don't expect you to come to Cambridge with a fully developed set of skills. Otherwise, kind of what would be the point? It's not just about the content that you're going to be taking on board over the next few years or 9 months, depending on how long you're here. It's actually about developing all these other kind of cognate skills that are going to support that development in terms of pushing your knowledge forward. So thinking about the way that we can improve is really, really important. Like I said, push your boundaries, take risks. This is an amazing time to do it. There's lots of support to help you push those boundaries and to pick you up when you fall and to develop those skills so that you can have another go at it. And like it says here, learning to feel confident in certain encounters, makes us feel, and we've lost a word there, but makes us feel confident, makes us feel positive. And this is all taken from the Chadwick article, which I refer to at the end. Okay, so let's put a little bit of this into practice now. Let's take about 3 or 4 minutes to reflect on something. I've suggested you choose an educational encounter because that's what we're doing. We're training you to be reflective researchers, but it could be anything that's happened over the last few weeks, particularly if you're a new student here. So it might have been meeting new people. It might have been trying to get involved in a club or society, but it might have been your first supervision with your PhD supervisor or a reading group. And then free write the following. So you can choose to do it on computer or by hand, and just keep writing. Like we said, don't stop, don't think about punctuation and grammar. How did you feel about it? What went well? What didn't go so well? What was challenging? If you could change something, if you're going to do this again, what would you change? Even if it went really well, is there anything you would change? And have you actually resolved to do things differently? Perhaps you've already implemented some of those changes. So, why did it go well? Why didn't it go well? And so what does it, what does it matter? So thinking about that reflective practice diagram that we looked at earlier, those kind of theories. So I will set a timer, for 4 minutes, and then I will let you just write. I'm just going to myself there. Let's just go back to that. Sorry, that was the wrong slide. There's the activity again. Okay, so just the last few seconds on that. Okay, so hopefully you found that you kind of loosened up as you went through the process. So whenever I've done this, I sort of start and I put something down, and I stop and I think, and then you kind of build up momentum and you kind of get into that practice of writing freely. So as we've talked, one way to kind of implement this would just be to kind of have a little journal, have a little notebook somewhere on your phone that you can do this, and to look back on an experience. Hopefully when you were writing just then, you were thinking, okay, so when I was looking back, I was thinking about what were my expectations before I started something? How did I approach it? How did I prepare for it? What went well, what didn't? Then, as we said, like, how has your knowledge and understanding changed? So thinking about in the present, what have I actually learned from this experience? And then moving towards the future, how am I going to do something differently if I'm faced with a similar situation, or what challenges might I face in the future? Why, something that went well this time, like we said, preempting that idea of failure or something not going well and not being surprised when, oh, it didn't go as smoothly as I'd expected because it went well last time. So always being prepared for possible challenges. Now, it might be that you formally have to do this as part of your course. If you're on a doctoral program, you might be completing a PDP, a personal development plan, where you are expected to kind of identify your training needs. And that's something that's really difficult to do if you haven't properly stopped and thought and reflected about what it is that makes you feel really good at the moment. What do you feel that you're good at? What do you feel that actually there's just a kind of knowledge gap? There's a kind of particular kind of technical skill, perhaps with a piece of software, or perhaps there's a piece of equipment in your lab, or if you're an arts researcher, actually just getting more to grips with kind of critical reading and literature searching kind of in depth. Maybe you've always been tied to reading this previously, and for the first time you're kind of having to go off and do your own searching. So there might be a kind of technical thing that you have to do, or it might be kind of broader. It might be about kind of how you feel when you're carrying out a particular activity. And what we try not to think about too much is, what we're good and bad at, but what makes us feel strong or what makes us feel weak. Even though, we might not be very good at something, actually, we might feel really good when we're doing it. We might feel that we've got a level of confidence about it. That's kind of easier to apply to like a hobby or something. So it might be that I might not be very good at playing netball, but actually when I meet up with, a group of friends and play netball, it makes me feel really good, even though technically I know I'm not that great. That's probably an easier way of doing it rather than through an academic lens. It's quite difficult. Often something that we feel we're missing out on the skills makes us not feel very good. So thinking though about, where do we feel good? Where do we feel bad? Where have we got gaps? And what do we need to help us be successful in our work? And this reflective writing process, the idea of that isn't necessary to identify that in the first place. But like we said, when you then take a break after you've done that reflective writing and then going back and looking at it, it's at that point you can then identify, now I can see where the problems are. It was with my note making, it was with my referencing, it was with my qualitative research skills. It was with my ability to kind of communicate effectively in an oral way rather than in a written way. At that point, you start to be able to spot the kind of skills weaknesses and then to think about feeding those into some sort of development plan. And so that is the kind of essentially the last question on here, what skills do I need to develop? Why do I need to develop them? And ultimately, when am I going to develop them as well? Depending on the length of your course, you're going to have less or more time to do that. So again, this is kind of building hopefully on that reflective practice that you've just done, that reflective writing. And I'm just going to give you a couple of moments to think about how you're going to develop your skills. And in doing so, it might be helpful just to kind of use this as a checklist. So I've already mentioned kind of key people within the college who can help you in a kind of pastoral way when you're looking for some support, but also to think kind of more concretely about how you're going to develop those skills. So we've got skills like, we've got workshops like this within the library. You can kind of come and see us one-to-one as well. We've got writing consultants who will see you one-to-one to help you develop your writing skills. We've got our asynchronous materials if you just kind of want to get some top tips on how to use AI in your research, for example. Then there's a whole host of training available from the university. So this is on the University Training Booking System, UTBS, and the URL I've put on the slide here. There's courses on absolutely everything. Some of them are self-directed, particularly of the IT courses. You can just work through a kind of workbook. Others are online. Others will actually be in a lab or a computer lab or in a lecture theatre. They'll be collaborative. You'll work with other people on those. And your faculty and department, of course, are going to offer support in that way, as will any research group that you're part of as well. There are also loads of books that you can read to help develop your skills. So we've got a really nice section on academic skills books in the library. They're opposite my office and the borrowing machine, and we're really happy to get more books in on that, but lots on research methods, on academic writing, on broader research skills. There's loads of great blogs. Like I said, a lot of PhD researchers do want to share their experiences. There's also people who've been through the process who are academics, like the Thesis Whisperer, who have some really super blogs. And I think that helps you realize that you're not the only person going through the problems that you're experiencing. You're not the only person who's come across challenges or times when it was going really well and then it took, something unexpected happened. It's really nice to be able to learn from the experiences of others. And I would really encourage you just to talk to other people. I've put that down as one of the things here, peer support. Try and develop a culture where it's okay to say that things aren't going that well. Loads of videos, lots of podcasts out there as well. And yeah, like I said, you can kind of come and see somebody one-to-one. So just to go back to that activity, just to take a couple of minutes, you might have developed a PDP already, but if you haven't, this is a chance for you to identify some of the skills that you might want to improve and to think about how you're actually going to do something about that. Okay, so you just had a couple of minutes there to do that. That's definitely not long enough to create an entire personal development plan. But I think, yeah, just finding out what sort of sources of support are available. And I've seen we've got a question come through about how to improve presentation or communication skills. So there might be formal courses within a department or faculty. I'd encourage you to take advantage of as many opportunities to speak in public as well, perhaps to get advice from peers. But within Wolfson specifically, we've got something called the Wolfson Research Event coming up. So this is something that takes place in May every year, and it's a student-led conference. It's organised by Wolfson students for Wolfson students. And the idea is that it's meant to be a safe space in which people can give presentations, not necessarily for the first time, but they may not be super confident at doing so. As part of that, we offer a number of workshops on giving presentations, how to develop, effective and kind of PowerPoint slides, how to be a good public speaker, also how to develop a poster, to give a poster presentation and the skills that you'll need to talk to that poster as well. And then there's the actual event itself, where you can speak to members of the Wolfson community who are students and fellows and emeritus fellows and staff, get questions. And that's a really nice space. And I imagine a lot of departments will do something similar. They might have seminar series. There's often lots of opportunities that you can take. And I think to see those as really supportive opportunities. They're not necessarily big international conferences, but there's peers there who can give you feedback and kind of support you through that process. Again, I know we've also got a few books in the library on giving effective presentations, and I'm sure there's going to be lots on YouTube as well about that. But that's something that we can perhaps develop a bit of a section on our LibGuide about. Actually, I don't think we've got anything specifically on that side of things. So thanks for that. Okay, so that's it. We've finished yet just in time. There's my email address there. There's a link to the LibGuide. And as I said, I've put some of the references on there for the books and articles that I've referenced during the presentation. So thank you very much for staying with me for the duration of the workshop. I hope that you found it useful. I'm just going to stop recording now. And if anyone's got